hit that climax, make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel. This next scene is a little gruesome, and I would hate if I lost you in the carnage. Let's move on to the bin test. I thought the solid aluminum body would do a much better job of holding this phone together, but I was actually really surprised at how easy this phone was to bend. It looks like the weakest point is right there where that power button is. So in reality, the iPhone 6 Plus is holding up much better than I expected. The minor initial bend could be straightened out pretty easily, but I'm not here to play patty cake with the iPhone though, so let's keep going. After a lot more pressure, I finally got the screen to break. The discoloration in the screen is most likely from the LCD ribbon cable. As you can see, the phone is still fully functional at this point, although it is probably angry with me. I am going to apply a little bit of pressure and yikes. I am being completely serious when I say my little sister could have bent this phone in half with her hands. Keep in mind there are a million factors that you take into consideration when buying a smartphone, not just durability. But durability is a factor, and that's where I come in. Now onto the bin test.
No, Felixos.
Over 25 phones now, and only 3 have catastrophically failed. Let's move on to the bin test. This robin did not make it very far from the nest. Even budget phones normally survive this bin test. But at least it recovered, unlike the Galaxy S7. Some phones are just stronger and more durable than others. So let's start the bin test. As we start the flex, it is immediately reminiscent of the Redmi 3 Pro. With the screen flexing out of the frame, you can see the plastic edge crack on the display. The major difference here is when the Note 3 screen actually comes up and out of the back panel. I was not expecting that to happen, as it seems like common sense to screw all the components together instead of free float them. It is built very similar to the HTC M9, which also failed the bin test. 0.5-inch LCD display did completely recover though. And now the bin test. The U11 almost has the same basic build and design of the U Ultra, with one fatal difference. When applying pressure from the back, the flexible and squeezable metal frame allows the device to bend more than it should. And that becomes a real problem when it flexes from the front. And it's dead. This means that the HTC U11 will join its friends on my shelf of shame. The back glass appears functions just like normal. And now it's time for the bin test. I've tested about 50 different phones on my YouTube channel. I agree it's a slightly strange hobby. I've only had 5 of these 50 phones catastrophically fail. Most phones are pretty well built, budget phones included among the flagships. But this phone in particular doesn't quite make it. The exterior glass doesn't look too bad. It's more the LCD under the glass that cracked and shattered. Testing the overall build quality of a phone is essential to the people who want a phone that will survive everyday life. And unfortunately, this BlackBerry Key 1 is not a survivor. I was even holding the screen when it popped out of the frame. It surprised me to see the screen do that, since most other screens, like Samsung, have so much adhesive behind them it takes a high-powered heat gun or industrial hot plate to remove them. And this BlackBerry screen is held in by nothing. This is where things go downhill. First of all, with the initial flex, it bends way more than I anticipated. Normally, phones are much more solid than this. With that massive flex, the glass display is now shattered with multiple fractures. Remember, I've tested over 100 phones, and the vast majority of the phones I test survive, even the previous motorized Vivo Nex. Commencing the bend on the Oppo Find X, I instantly knew something was wrong with this phone. It bent way too far, and never locked out or stopped bending like most phones do. Some parts of the phone can handle the flex, like the metal frame, but one thing that can't handle the flexing is the rigid and brittle AMOLED display panel. That display underneath the glass cracks, rendering the screen pretty useless since the colors now have a mind of their own. The back panel starts lifting off and both the front and rear glass shatter into oblivion. The back glass panel helps or hinders the overall structure. On the very first bend, we get a loud popping noise, which is the front glass shattering and book bags or laying around unnoticed on a couch cushion, chair, or bed before someone sits down. Structural integrity is still important. And the iPad Pro just doesn't have any of that structural integrity stuff. Is the bin test. With the plastic frame on the Redmi Note 7, I have my doubts about its strength. The first bend shows some massive flex on both the frame and the screen, but no shattering. cracking, or breaking. I do always bend the phones from both sides though. And with the reverse flex, we get two cracks in the plastic frame, one next to the power button and one along the SIM card tray. The phone is still alive, not too shabby. The Note 7 can definitely handle some abuse and still keep kicking. One last bend for the road. And without the structural support along both cracked side rails, the screen is unable to survive. The LCD cracks underneath the glass surface, rendering the display useless. Of course, it's time for the bend test, the ultimate test of construction and build quality. Remember, most phones survive this test just fine. I'll start from the back and with a subtle flex, with no noises or cracks. The first bend of the iPod Touch absolutely destroys the display, and something new happens. The back glass has cracked. Now, obviously I subject my phones to more abuse. Let's say you leave your phone on the couch, face down, and Great Aunt Susie comes over to ask why you didn't bring a special someone with you to the family reunion. She sits down and... now your screen is unresponsive and has a cool new 4-point design in the center, not from the rock.
It's only when bending from the front that you hear the first snap. I try not to get spooked when my phone cracks, but I am only human. It turns out it was the frame near the volume button. And once that last shred of structure was gone, someone accidentally sitting on it. Even our swooping eagle probably can't protect the iPad from its own little microphone holder. It really is in the worst spot. The design flaw is still a design flaw. Who would have thought? With just one bend, the iPad Pro's second generation also snaps in half, just like the first one. Probably because Apple changed nothing. To be fair though, the iPad Pro will most likely always be in a front pocket. But for kicks and giggles, if you were ever to put it in your back pocket, things might get a bit dangerous. For both the phone and your bum. As we can see, the phone screen is indeed made of glass, with cracks running along the entire surface. And now, only the bottom strip of the screen below that crack is still working. The iPhone 2 does not survive the bend test. Small crack, for some reason, has catastrophically affected the internal vibrator, which now sounds more like a hissing cat than anything else. With another bend from the front, we lose the entire screen. At that same weak point, that antenna line. The Victus glass in the front is still intact. It's just the display under the glass that has given up the ghost. 1 billion codes are gone in an instant. This, of course, is not an ideal situation. A phone without a screen is like a car without tires. Finally, we'll flip the phone around to the back and try one more time. And right there next to the center USB-C and accessory port, we find another weak point in the frame. And just like Apple's iPad, it's game over for the ROG Phone 5. Extremely heavy, to the point where I'm not even remotely concerned about it breaking. But, you know, there are some weird shapes and structural designs going on. And, well, turns out there is a weaker gaming phone than the ROG Phone 5, along with your curves. We'll leave the phone mostly fine. No cracks or permanent damage, just some pretty major flags. It's the bending from the other direction that we'll need to watch out for. Carbon fiber is not so strong around its third axis, perpendicular to those fibers. This phone is officially totaled and does not survive my durability test or integrity of the phone as a whole, as I always do with the bend test. If you ever hear noises during this portion of the video, it's usually a bad thing. And none of those were good noises. The volcanic black frosted back has been thoroughly cracked. The cracks consolidate into what looks like a line directly underneath the stovetop camera bump. I don't think it's the frosted glass that's what's making the phone weaker though, since we've had plenty of frosted textured glass phones survive. And they survive in one piece instead of millions. I think it's something else. The phone is still alive though, which is good. Let's bend the OnePlus 10 Pro from the other direction. And now, except for the flashlight, the OnePlus 10 Pro is definitely not alive anymore. I would say, and at first it looks like all those changes might have paid off. No structural damage or cracked glass. So far it's lasted longer than the 10 Pro, at least until we it over. Same spot, right at the camera lens, which is rather unfortunate. I was rooting for this one, and we might as well keep going. Once again, the 10T fractures along the same line as the 10 Pro, right along the top of the battery. Notice though the screen pulling its own weight with an almost 90-degree bend, and still in one piece. Wait, I guess going the full 90 is a bad idea. Or maybe the screen is actually still fine, and it's just the battery ribbons that have come disconnected.